Welcome back to The Critique. We're here to help you sharpen your work and really maximize its impact.
Today we're looking at a piece on Tim Castle's negotiation framework. It's a summary, really, focused on mindset, prep, and, tactics.
And it's an exceptionally well-structured piece of material. I mean, it covers everything, the inner game, strategic empathy, all the way to asking and listening.
Yeah, the author clearly has a deep, expert grasp of Castle's principles, no question.
But I think to elevate this from a great summary to a truly high-level analysis, we need to focus on what unique value it can bring beyond the book itself.
Exactly.
So let's start there with the material's overall perspective. I think the material, while it's structured perfectly as a kind of blueprint or a book summary, it just misses this opportunity to establish a really original or critical perspective. Where it loses a little altitude for me is in the language. The material, it keeps calling itself a guide. It uses phrases like, this book will walk you through, or chapter 1 lays the foundation.
Right, it's describing itself.
Yes. And that faithfulness to the source, it's accurate. But for an expert audience who already knows this stuff, it prevents the work from asserting its own so what, The reader is here for synthesis, not just a summary.
Yeah, that's a classic challenge when you treat a summary as the end product. And I think the way forward is to shift the framework entirely. Move from a descriptive summary to something like a masterclass application.
Okay, I like that. A masterclass application.
I mean, you dedicate real space to synthesizing Castle's techniques, not just listing them, but weaving them together through a new strategic lens. You have all the pieces right there. BATNA, log rolling, the goal anchor principle. The next step is to show how they all interact.
I love that shift from description to dynamic application. It's the difference between memorizing the rule book and actually winning the game.
Right.
So which of Castle's concepts do you think is maybe the best candidate for this kind of integrated case study? Something that's hard to apply in a vacuum.
I think rejection reframing is perfect for this, because it forces the negotiator to pivot under pressure, which is exactly where an expert audience needs guidance.
Okay.
The material right now just sort of details the steps, treat no as a window, that kind of thing. We need to go past that. We need to analyze a really specific, complex, high-stakes scenario, something that wasn't in Castle's original work.
So a completely new case.
Exactly. Let's just imagine a complex B2B contract negotiation, multi-million-dollar tech integration. And the deal is stalled because the other party, let's call them vendor B, rejects the proposal on price. A hard no.
Okay, so a clear rejection on the most important dimension.
Yep. The material should then show how an expert immediately applies rejection reframing. That no isn't the end. It reveals vendor B's limit, but it also gives you leverage points.
So you don't just drop the price.
An expert wouldn't. They'd use, say, strategic empathy to figure out why price is the issue. Is it a budget constraint, a scarcity problem, or is it maybe fear of future performance, a risk problem?
Ah, and that's where the synthesis comes in. Because if the rejection is about feature risk, that's your cue to bring in the log rolling principle.
Now you're getting it.
You show how the expert uses that no on price as a launchpad to trade on other terms.
Precisely. If they won't meet the price, you don't just compromise your BATNA. You leverage their rejection. You might say something like, okay, I hear price is a concern. That tells me the risk profile of this is maybe higher for you than we thought. So let's add a performance-based incentive, that's your log rolling item, that reduces your risk. But in exchange, we need exclusivity on maintenance for 3 years.
And that analysis shows the audience that the rejection didn't end the negotiation at all. It just defined the battlefield.
Yes.
The critique then moves from what is rejection reframing to how do 3 different Castle principles actually interlock when the stakes are high.
And that is the difference between summary and a masterclass. When you do that, the structure suddenly feels so much sharper. It avoids that repetition we saw, which actually leads us right into our second point about structure and flow.
It's a perfect transition. Yeah, so our next area for improvement is about pacing. The fundamental concepts on mindset and confidence. They're strong, but they're introduced again and again across different sections, and it really disrupts the flow.
I saw that too.
The challenge is that the material scatters this whole discussion of the inner game across Chapter 1, Chapter 2, and then all the way over in Chapter 7. So you get the core idea, great negotiators are made, not born, in Chapter 1, but then practical things like visualization are way out in chapter 7.
Long after you've already dived into the tactics.
Exactly. It feels structurally segmented. It's like the author put the mindset concepts wherever they appeared in the original text. Which, it's fine for a summary, but it's not great for the reader's experience.
I agree. The repeated intros about the need for confidence, it just slows things down before you even get to the actionable stuff like the ask then silence rule.
Right.
I do wonder, though, if we consolidate all the mindset material at the very beginning, do we risk front-loading it too heavily? Making it feel like a lecture on positive thinking before you get to the good stuff?
That's a really valid concern. And the suggestion isn't just to copy and paste it all together. It's more of an editorial move. We need to create a single, high-impact foundation module.
Okay.
This front-loads that essential psychological context, the why, and then it allows the technical chapters on preparation, on asking, on listening, to just proceed with a really sharp, uninterrupted focus.
So we treat it like behavioral priming. We gather all those core declarations, the shift from scarcity to abundance, the importance of daily habits, the need for internal certainty, into one cohesive module. Maybe call it something like the negotiator's operating system.
I love that. The negotiator's operating system.
It lets the reader digest that fundamental belief system first. You deal with the internal blocks, and then you open the door to the external strategies. It creates a much sharper contrast.
Exactly right. You eliminate the redundancy. For example, you could combine the statement, if you don't ask, the answer is always no, from Chapter 2, with the advice to use decisive positive language from Chapter 7. You merge those, put them up front, and suddenly you have a single, powerful opening argument on, say, taking ownership. And that really sets the stage for everything else.
It gives the material a much cleaner editorial feel. It signals to the expert audience that this is a refined synthesis, not just a chronological retelling.
Yeah.
It basically acknowledges that the expert already knows what botany is. What they need to know is how to maintain the psychological certainty to actually use it. And that context belongs right up front.
A consolidated psychological base that perfectly sets up the strategy that follows. Which brings us to our third major point on tone and style.
Okay.
So, while the motivational tone does align with the source material, the consistent use of hyperbolic and exhortatory language, it risks undermining the material's analytical credibility for an expert audience.
I definitely picked up on this.
The text often uses really dramatic language. Negotiation is a weapon, confidence is an underrated superpower, and then you have these promises like, you can get what you want every time.
Right. That motivational style, it's energizing, sure, but it can start to overshadow the strategic brilliance of a technique like mirroring and labeling or the value equation.
Yeah, when you use phrases like live without limits, you risk making the whole piece sound less like a rigorous analysis and more like a sales manifesto or something.
A seminar pitch, yeah. We need to rebalance the voice. The suggestion here is to replace those overly emotive calls to action with objective strategic framing. You can maintain the conviction, but you increase the rigor by using more analytical language.
And that signals to the expert listener that we're talking about verifiable psychological levers, not just, abstract ideas.
Which is crucial for high-stakes professionals. They don't just want to be told to be bold. They want to know why being bold actually works.
Exactly.
So, let's take the ask high, anchor strong principle. In the material now, the focus is on the boldness, right? It tells the reader to ask above your ideal outcome. We need to pull back the curtain a bit and talk about the mechanism at play.
Okay. How would you do that?
Well, instead, you could frame it as the deliberate deployment of anchoring bias to define the effective range of negotiation.
See, that phrasing immediately appeals to someone who understands cognitive science.
It transforms the advice from just be brave into deploy a tactical psychological mechanism. And that's a huge difference in weight and credibility. It shows mastery over the theory behind the techniques.
Right.
We see this again with the power of silence. The material says your silence is more powerful than any clever sentence, which is motivational, but it's abstract.
So we need to ground it.
We need to emphasize its function as a strategic tool. Highlight that silence isn't just a dramatic pause. It's a calculated technique for creating a psychological pressure gap,
or for utilizing the information gap that Kossel talks about later.
A psychological pressure gap. I like that.
It's about creating space where the other party feels compelled to fill the vacuum, and in doing so, they reveal information or they concede value prematurely.
By using terms like that, you're appealing directly to the expert's technical knowledge. It grounds the advice in verifiable strategy, which is exactly what a high-level audience expects.
Absolutely. I mean, look, the bones of this material are rock solid, but these kinds of adjustments, shifting the language toward objective analysis, that's what will push it into the upper tier of critique and application.
Is the most important. Rework the material's angle to provide true synthesis, a masterclass application beyond a simple summary.
Yeah, build that new case study to show how concepts like log rolling and rejection reframing are interdependent.
Second, tighten up the thematic structure. Consolidate all the mindset and confidence sections into one foundational module, a powerful front-loaded section on behavioral priming to really improve the flow.
And third, refine that tone and style. Ground the motivational language in objective, mechanism-focused analysis.
Right, replace the exhortatory language with rigorous terms that speak directly to the reader's expertise.
The actionable steps are pretty clear. Build a specific case study, front-load all the confidence principles, and use analytical, mechanism-focused terminology like framing ask high as the deployment of anchoring bias. That's how you boost credibility with this audience.
This material is absolutely primed for impact. We're really looking forward to seeing the refined analysis once you've applied these points. Please send it back in once you've had a chance to work on the angle, structure, and tone, and we'll continue the critique.